Our moderator this evening is our own Sharon Trulman, who is the Chief Executive Officer for External Affairs and Institutional Research at Stockton College. She is also the founding Executive Director of the William J. Hughes Center for Public Policy, so she's responsible for many of our programs over the years that we've presented. She has a strong background in public affairs. She was the Chief of Staff and Chief Executive Officer of the New Jersey Board of Regulatory Commissioners, and was Executive Director of the First Legislative District Offices for New Jersey Assemblyman Edward H. Salmon. Prior to joining Stockton, Sharon was President and CEO of Aqua, New Jersey, a state-regulated water provider. We also have one of our own faculty members, and so glad he could participate, Dr. James Mack Avery, who is an Associate Professor of Political Science and has taught at Stockton since the fall of 2006. Mack earned his BA in Political Science from San Francisco State University and his PhD in Political Science from the University of Kentucky. Among the courses he teaches here at Stockton are Public Opinion, Campaigns and Elections, and News Media and the American Public. He has researched multiple aspects of election campaigns, including the influence of media on public opinion. We also have a good friend of Stockton, Steve D'Amico, who has vast experience in election campaigns. He's the senior partner and co-founder of Message and Media, a strategic communications company. Steve provides expertise in message development, communication strategies, and campaign management. He is one of the originators of New Jersey's coordinated campaign model, and has served as campaign director for 2 New Jersey governors and 3 U.S. senators, including the very recently successful campaign of Senator Robert Menendez. Prior to joining Message and Media, Steve served as executive director of the New Jersey Democratic State Committee. And representing our friends in the media, we have Charles Stile, who is the political columnist for the Record newspaper of Bergen County and has been one of the top reporters in New Jersey for a number of years. He's a former State House bureau chief at the Record and has covered politics and government in New Jersey. Prior to the Record, joining the Record, Charlie was a State House reporter for the Times of Trenton and was a reporter and editor at the Princeton Packet. And of course, he needs to have ties to our region. His first job out of college was a reporter for the Sentinel Ledger in Ocean City. So go Ocean City. So with that, I will turn it over to Sharon, and so happy all of you came. Thank you, and Sharon, please take it away.
Well, thank you all, first of all, for being here. It's nice to see this many people. This was a strange election, to say the least. I'm not sure if I can give it a better adjective than strange. So I'd like to take a look at what role the media played in affecting that campaign and the outcome of the campaign today. And I'm going to start with asking each of our guests here if they would take just a minute or two and talk about what their role was in doing some of these things. So why don't I start with Professor Avery?
My role? Well, my role as teacher, I guess, was to just monitor news coverage and media coverage generally, paid media too, of the election. And so I basically just watched and read.
And what do you think happened?
What did I think happened?
Yeah.
I thought that as far as the media, I'm of the opinion that a lot of what goes on in campaigns, including media coverage, doesn't have a real big effect most of the time. But I think in this campaign, we may have seen a few examples of where news coverage of the election and what happened in the campaign, not necessarily a function of the media coverage, but just reporting what was actually going on, she may have had a substantial effect.
Thank you. Steve?
Well, in our capacity as a campaign consulting firm, we were not only serving as the media consultants for Senator Menendez this year, but also for Chris Murphy, who won the Senate seat in Connecticut, for the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee, where we ran campaign ads in Maine in support of Angus King, the independent, who is going to caucus with the Democrats. We had a congressional race in Palm Beach County, Florida, Virginia, Pennsylvania, and a number of other independent expenditures that we were doing in congressional races down south. Look, I think what happened, look, there were winners in this campaign cycle, and where the media is concerned, that I'm not sure they were one of them. Certainly, polling and survey research was a winner, and Nate Silver in particular. Finally, we had polls that were right, or at least were consistent. I think there was also, Sharon, a victory for an emerging progressive coalition, which is only growing in this country, I'm delighted to say. It was a victory for social media. Social media played a huge role in this campaign, especially the Obama campaign, and one could argue was critical to the winning margin for Obama. And probably the other winners in this campaign were math and science, but we can talk about that some more. The losers besides Romney were the Ryan budget plan, big money donors who laid down a lot of money and got no return on their investment, the American election system in certain states, which is still antiquated and is against the franchise, and to my delight, Karl Rove.
A little side note, Steve's partner Brad Lawrence was down here a few years ago, I think it was 2009, and did a presentation that it is on the Hughes Center website. We talked about campaigns and whether they're smart or sleaze or something like that, I think was the topic at the time, and he addressed it, and we had a good thing. So when you leave here, if you want to learn more about it, that is on the Hughes Center website. Charlie, would you?
My role was limited. We cover the governor as our primary focus, but we were pretty much obsessed with his role in this sort of strange surrogacy he had for Mitt Romney. I mean, he began as his, his best buddy, and turned out to be, kind of subtly sticking shivs in his back throughout the year. And, I think Romney learned the old Corleone lesson from Michael Corleone lesson about keeping your friends and family close and your enemies closer. I think he learned that a little too late with Chris Christie. I think there's a lot of evidence that he kind of gradually, I guess, undermined Romney's message in a few key areas, even though his actions during Sandy, I think, were very appropriate and well received, it was really more of the over-the-top effusive nature of it and repeated effusive nature of it, I think, that got under the skin of the Romney people as much as the fact that it just threw Romney's message off track. So that was a pretty fascinating development, was Chris Christie's kind of stormy relationship with the Romney campaign. And I thought we saw the high point of it at the convention in Tampa, which I covered, and I thought the high point was Clint Eastwood in the chair incident, but it was really Christie and his keynote address, and which a lot of people kind of reframed the me note, because he spent 20 minutes talking about himself before mentioning Romney and Paul Ryan. And so we thought that was really very telling, and that's gotten a lot of analysis and coverage. I found that to be a pretty fascinating thing. And in terms of the, watching the advertising, my observation of that was fairly limited, because New Jersey was not a state in play. There was very few ads until, I think, in the end in the Philadelphia market for Romney, because they decided to play in Pennsylvania at the last minute. But in New York, I think we just basically saw a lot of more generic ads on CNN. So I think this, and that's a shame. I think there is a discussion to be had about whether or not the whole Electoral College system should be revisited, because I really felt as a journalist, as a citizen, somewhat left out of the whole, of the fervor of the debate.
Thank you. Let me ask you, I happened to be in Palm Beach during the last days of the election, and I'm not sure there was any programming on TV that wasn't an advertisement. And I was amazed at how many people on Election Day were walking around wearing little stickers that said, "I voted." What do you think, how do you think the perception that was created of Romney over the time played out in Palm Beach, in Florida in general, and other states specifically? Did we create a perception, the we being the media, did the media create a perception that he was a buffoon? And that, because that came across in a lot of different places, and until the debate, that may have changed. What do you think the effect of the debate and the media on Romney's persona was? Whoever would like to answer.
Well, look, I'm a partisan, so.
Really?
I would say, I would have to say that Romney created the impression that he was a buffoon of his own accord. It was simply reported. You know, YouTube doesn't lie for the most part. So the fact that these things were picked up and then broadcast many times over was to his own disadvantage. And again, I would say this is where social media is becoming so critically important in the 24-hour news cycle. So look, I just think the fact. Romney was always at a disadvantage, and I think you're right, Sharon, that it was, I think we all probably agree, his first debate performance is the only thing that changed that perception, was that suddenly his leadership dimensions went up after that. So, you know, up until that point, he was always sucking wind.
I never saw him as a buffoon, but I did see him. I thought the news coverage and the dynamics of the debate did reveal him to be somewhat, well, certainly inconsistent in his positions and desperate at the end. I think, you know, particularly in Ohio, when he made those widely pilloried ads about sending Jeep manufacturing jobs to China, was just absolutely desperate and ridiculous. I don't think I've ever seen an auto executive get in the middle of a campaign and debunk a candidate's ads like that. I mean, it was just, I didn't see feeling so much buffoon. I just felt like he was kind of a tragic figure who was desperate at the end to find any way to kind of adapt to overnight tracking polls.
Professor Avery, what do you think? Did that have an effect with the meetings?
Yeah, I think so. What's difficult is to suggest that the media made Romney look like a buffoon suggests that there's a bias. And so it's very difficult, though, to distinguish between a media bias and simply reflecting biases in the quality of the candidates. And so I think what both of the other panelists have said, and I would agree with, is that the extent to which Romney came off as a buffoon is because he came out and talked about the 47%, and it got played on YouTube, as Steve noted, over and over again. And so it is really difficult to talk about, to distinguish between those. And I mean, this is the non-scientific, supported opinion is, in my opinion, I agree that it was really, this was a candidate effect. The candidate made mistakes and gaffes, and then, I mean, if I were going to defend the news media, I would note that he did get a bump following that first debate, and the media reported it very positively. And so that would indicate to me that there wasn't like a systematic bias against Romney in the news.
They also reported after that debate very negatively on President Obama. Yeah. Was it accurate? Did he deserve? Did he deserve what he got?
I think so. Yes.
Yeah, it was. Do you think the media, and I'm going to keep staying with it, did you think it reflected the important issues of the campaign as we talked? Did they stay on topic, or did they get sidetracked into minuscule kinds of things.
I thought I thought it stayed on the main issues myself. It was the economy. It was an analysis of their, their plan, their job, Obama's record versus Romney's claims to lead the country in a different direction. I don't feel like I don't think there was a lot of tracking into like social issues or secondary issues. I think this was a primarily, they stayed on point.
When Congressman Aiken jumped into the picture, did it make a difference? Was that overblown by the media, or was that relevant to what was happening? Anybody?
I think it was. I think it's relevant. I think the fact that the polls changed so much for him afterwards suggests that. So it's also difficult to distinguish. So the effect of the media. So is the media coverage influencing the polls, or is the media coverage just reflecting the level of interest that the public, or what the public wants? And so, with that, I thought that, my opinion was it was such an outrageous statement that it warranted that much coverage, and that what appeared to be public reaction to the statement sort of confirms that.
Look, Sharon, I think that Governor Jindal's statements today, that the Republican Party ought to start taking a pretty good look at itself, is an opening, I hope, in a dialogue that will have this party really start taking a critical look at its grasp on reality. Because the fact that it continues to promote fantasy over science in a lot of ways is just going to continue to redound to its disadvantage. And look, there are plenty of people in the Republican Party who don't, and who can move in a progressive direction, but unfortunately, they're not the leaders.
You want to say something, Charlie?
Oh, yeah, I just feel that the issues of the whole Aiken, Murdoch, Walsh episode, or the governor of Virginia with the ultrasound episode, these were not anything that directly related to Romney, but I think it kind of fostered the fear that Romney, if elected, would be held hostage by this party that was really on the fringe, and that he would never be able to, even though a lot of people felt in their hearts, and if you looked at his record in Massachusetts, by the way, which really was an impressive in certain areas record, his ability to navigate the Democratic Party shoals in Massachusetts to get Romney Care enacted by co-opting Ted Kennedy, of all people, to help him in this enterprise and get it enacted as a Republican governor is really a marvelous achievement, which we never heard anything about. But my point is, after reading a lot about that, I came away with the impression that this guy is a pretty savvy, moderate, results-oriented guy, and he probably wouldn't, in another time and another new election cycle, probably would be an effective president. But he had to lurch so far to the right in the primaries, and he had to he kind of had this Faustian compact with the right that he never got over that. And so then when Aiken, Murdoch, and Walsh, and I think the governor, I can't remember the name, O'Connell, the governor of Virginia. O'Donnell, excuse me. When they all got caught up in these controversies, it just fostered the impression that he was never going to, if he got into the Oval Office, he was never going to get out. He was never going to be able to govern the way he would probably want to, that he was going to be a pawn of extremists.
Let me ask you about another comment, whether the media took it out of proportion and it had an effect or it didn't. In one of the debates, Governor Romney used the phrase about the binder of women. I think he's sitting here and he may shoot me for saying it, one of our political science professors asked me, what was so bad about that? What do you think? Did the media make that bad, or was it bad? I know what my own personal reaction as a woman was, but I don't know whether it got blown out of proportion or not by others.
Well, it wasn't as bad as the 47%.
No.
But, you know, it was the same clumsy use of words. I don't get the impression he meant anything ill by it, but, you know, these things do start to form a narrative.
So did the media take that where it didn't need to go? Was it more of a, did they make it more of a big deal than it
I
was?
thought in that case that they did, that they were sort of piling on.
I thought that issue was driven more by the reaction on social media. It became this instant viral sensation by a lot of snarky comments by people on Twitter and Facebook. I think it was a little bit overblown, but it did kind of have this kind of antiseptic, kind of corporate view of women. It was kind of dehumanizing a little bit that, oh, binder of women. You know, it's not like I went and hired some great women for my office that were just really talented, and you know, they represent the future of the country. No, they were like something out of Staples or something. It was like they bought them out of like a supply, like some supply
or a dating
warehouse
service.
or something.
Okay.
It just seemed totally distant. I don't know. I think
Professor
it
Avery?
kind of resonated with people.
Yeah, I guess I think it was a little bit blown out of proportion by the news, and I think like the distinction between that comment and the 47% is that the 47% seemed to be, so it was called a gaffe, which is defined as a socially awkward statement or whatever. So that statement, the 47%, seemed to be his genuine opinion. Whereas the binder full of women,
point.
I don't know. My guess is I think he meant a binder full of women's names.
Yeah.
You know. And that was a mistake gaffe. Whereas I would say the 47% was, it told us it was just that it was described as a gaffe, I think says something about him as a candidate. That what seemed to be his genuine opinion was described as a gaffe. So I think that's a difference. And so I think like the 47% comment, you know, that was really fair game.
That was fair game.
The binder full of women.
So you have the opinion of 3 men, which you can discount.
Right, and I also know your wife and her activities with Women's Political Caucus, and she probably had a heart attack when she heard the binder full of women. I wouldn't have want to been in the room at the same time. Do you think the campaign coverage of the media served the public good? Did it make a difference? Does it really reflect the important issues? We've just talked about different little pieces, but what do you think about it? And then I'm going to ask you for a second piece of that. How about the paid media and advertising? I know it did wonders for your checkbook, but does it serve the public good?
No.
Do you want to stop there?
Yeah.
Okay. Would somebody else like to jump in?
No, it's the way I make my living. But
I know.
I think you know, in the general scheme of things, it's political advertising does not really serve the public. You know, I just think the format that we are forced into, and the mutually assured destruction philosophy that has engendered itself in political advertising. I mean, it's gotten to the point where it's really quite silly. As one of the purveyors, I can tell you that. And you know, I also think it got to the point this year where it certainly reached its point of diminishing returns.
I would agree with a lot of that, but except, however, and I find myself in this awkward position of kind of defending negative ads. I have to say, I am a little more. I used to be one of the ones who always decried negative ads. Why, you know, you're just poisoning the public, and to a certain degree, and I still hold that true. You're with a lot of falsehoods and misinformation, but you really think about it. The negative ads are the only ones that people really debate and discuss with a lot of passion and thoroughness. For example, that Jeep ad, those ridiculous ads in Ohio about the taking jobs to China was, as I said, was really pilloried and examined and almost microscopic detail. It was debated on all the talk shows across the country, on all the MSNBC, Fox, all the national broadcasts. It was truth squatted to death. I mean, I think the public really came away with, you know, they really got a full picture of really what Chrysler did. And it's because of, it was provoked, if you will, by misinformation. Now, I say again, I'm not saying I'm going to be a great advocate for negative campaigns, because I still feel ambivalent. I'd rather have the issues debated, you know, in a perfect world. I'd like to see them, you know, on the McNeil-Lehrer report debated even-handedly and with a nice measured tone, and, you know, statesman-like, and no one says anything mean. But the reality is that sometimes they do engender debate.
Charlie, before Mac jumps in, I just got to say, look, I agree with what you're saying, except I think what Citizens United has wrought is really a lack of any kind of moral compass in what gets put into a 30-second spot anymore, because there's really no standard anymore. And I can tell you that as somebody who was fighting a lot of that stuff in the Senate races this year. There is a different standard for non-candidate advertising on the truth meter. On the truth meter, and when you look at spending this year, you had about $3 billion spent in the presidential campaign, $1 billion of which was independent expenditures with no candidate's name attached to it. 2/3 of which was in support of Romney, 1/3 for Obama. And I'm not saying that either one of them was better than the other. I'm just saying there was no standard attached to those ads. So in a lot of ways, I think the dialogue was poisoned. I think a lot of people saw them for what they were, but a lot of people didn't. A lot of people take the only information they get from political advertising.
Professor Avery, what is the effect on the public?
Yeah, I think that, I mean, I agree with both comments, depending on the type of ad. And so there's research that shows that, like, thoughtful, critical ads actually inform people. And so they can have that effect. But I think it is clear that there is this other standard for these ads by the independent ads. And that they get played, you know, it can have a good effect if they get played over and over again by the news media. However, there's also research that shows that this actually, it reinforces the ad's message, because lots more people get exposed to it repeatedly. And so, especially if people are looking to confirm an opinion that's consistent with the ad, watching it over and over and over tends to do that for them.
At the very end, if I would, at the very end, there was another ad that I'd like to bring in. At the very end, in the Philadelphia market, there was the ad that showed Romney's position on Roe v. Wade. And it's his own quotes. There were maybe four different views of him. Negative ad or a fair game?
It was, I didn't see the ad, but if it's framed in it with an ominous tone and with this, you know, this scolding voice, yeah, I guess
well,
you
it was black and white. Okay.
Black and white negative, but again, if this is a litany and they're accurate ads.
They were him speaking. Did you see them, Steve?
No.
Well,
they were actually.
Oh, they took clips of him.
They actually took clips of Governor Romney and 4 different times where he gave his opinion on Roe v. Wade and what he would do about it.
I don't usually use the negative ad as to characterize, you know, an attack ad or, you know, a comparative ad or whatever, because if the information in it is accurate, I don't consider it negative. I consider it informational.
right, that's what I was going to, I mean, if the information's factual, you know, it does have the presence of a negative ad, an ominous tone, and black and white and all that, but
A little red thrown
I
in
think
there.
what Steve's talking about are those ads that just are, you know, have that ominous tone in black and white and are just full of falsehoods and crap. I mean, that's another, those are pernicious.
Let's move a little bit now to the social media and the internet and what role they might have played in this election, and was it more or less of a factor than it was in 2008? Like your opinions on that?
I don't know that it was, I mean, I guess I haven't seen enough evidence for me to judge whether it was more or less a factor. But I mean, my take is that it certainly wasn't less a factor. I think it was at least as important as it was in 2008. And when it comes to like the internet, I think what's really important to understand, like with the internet, is that there's so much there that people who are looking, so this sort of gets back to the first part of your last question, which was whether news media, not just like ads, serves the public. So it does, in especially the internet, and so in the people who are looking for information can find it, and there's tons of information out there, and a little bit of work you can distinguish between, you know, what's biased, what's not, or whatever. And so I think that the new media and the internet serves the public in that way. However, you know, for the people who aren't willing to put in that effort, it's really difficult.
You know, this is a timely question because the New York Times yesterday, the business section, actually addressed this question, Sharon. TV ads in 2008, 1.2 million TV ads this year, 1.4. YouTube views featuring a candidate's name, 1.6 million in 2008, 2.6 million this year. Facebook users who told their friends that they voted, 5.4 million in 08, 9.7 million this year. What else we have? Donors who gave via text messages, 0% in 2008, 10% this year.
Wow.
Twitter followers of @Barack Obama, 110,000 in 08, 23 million so did it increase? Yeah.
I also think that I saw there was an astonishing amount of Twitter involvement in the first debate that actually enhanced the public conversation about the debate. I mean, I was sitting at home, you know, twittering, you know, firing off my first impressions and raising questions about, you know, is that accurate? Or then I would find somebody's instant truth squatting of a comment that one of the candidates made, and then I would retweet it, and I felt that was great, and I think that really enhanced the public engagement in the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I know at some point I started deleting emails from my friend Michelle Obama and Bill Clinton and everybody else. I was getting so much email I didn't know what to do with it. So if the social media and the internet are so viable and increasing so much, does that mean traditional news media is less relevant or not going to be relevant in future campaigns? You don't want to hear that, do you, Charlie?
Well,
But it's a question, is it becoming less relevant? Are people not reading it in the newspaper and instead getting their information online?
I don't know. I'm not so convinced of that. And this isn't a Pollyannish view. I just think it's all, I think the social media supplements, I think we're all part of one big media entree that people have. I don't think we're, you know, people read the web in the exclusion of a print piece. I'd like to think that's true, but I think what we're going to see is, to actually be more accurate, you're going to see the record of Bergen County, now the North Jersey Media Group, in the next 10 years to be probably all online, 10 to 15, make it 21 until I retire.
Okay.
But that you're going to see that we'll still be we'll be still reporting the news and publishing it pretty much the same way. It's just in a new format. So, and we also have different niches too. I think ours is going to be more local and state news, and people will turn to us for that. But, and I think though the New York Times, the national media, people are still very much reliant on them as being sort of this sober, you know, institutional voice that filters out a lot of the static of social media, and they go to it. And I find myself doing that too. go there for a more sensible, reasoned, and Wall Street Journal perspective. So I think it's still going to be very relevant. They just won't see it in paper as much.
What do you think, Professor Avery?
I agree. I mean, obviously, the newspapers and network news are not what they were in the 1980s when that was it. But they are adapting, and so lots of people get their news from the New York Times and Washington Post online, or local news online, and so I don't think that the traditional media is irrelevant or going to lose relevance. It's just that now people have more choices, and some people don't want to get the maybe less, more neutral view that the traditional news offers.
You have an opinion, Steve?
Yeah, look, I think.
Oh, I never noticed that.
No,
Okay.
you sort of have to distinguish, I think, between print media and electronic in all its
Correct.
forms. And look, electronic has sort of become an echo chamber with online and social media in a lot of ways. But, the print media is still my refuge because it's the only place where you can go where you're getting something that you're getting news, right? I don't go to Fox News for news, right? I go to the New York Times for news. And, you can sit there and read something without someone shouting it at you. So to me, it's great to sit down with a cup of coffee in the morning and still read a hard copy of the paper without somebody shouting it at you.
It is still the static-free, mature voice, calming, mature voices. And, it's where you get the institutional, mature voice. I feel when I read the editorial page in the New York Times, I'm not getting a lot of, freewheeling, unreasoned opinion.
All right, well, our students sitting out here are more the beginning of the millennial generation, the digital generation. Can I ask you, if you would, did you get most of your news, how many of you got your news campaigns from traditional newspapers? And how many of you got them from online different sites, tweets? Uh-oh, Charlie, you may retire sooner than you think.
Well, I should have said 10 years instead of 20. It's probably more accurate.
With that, I think I'd like to start getting, the students have been giving us, and people in the audience have been giving us questions, and I'd like to give them an opportunity. You know John a little bit, don't you?
Oh, I do.
Just a little bit,
He's
okay.
an old ink-stained scribe, that guy over there.
Yeah, yeah.
Ink-stained wretch is the word.
I'm just going to take these as they come across. What makes a compelling political ad? We'll let Steve jump in on that one.
I shouldn't answer that. Someone other than me should answer that. I do it for a living, but.
Yeah, but that's what they want to hear. What really makes it compelling?
Well, I don't know. We actually do a lot of testing for advertising before we put it on air. We don't take a chance with ominous music before we let somebody react to it in a bubble somehow. But we did something unusual this year in the Menendez campaign, where every single ad we did, we used him as the voiceover. He was featured in every single ad that we did, and he won by the biggest margin since Bill Bradley in 1984. Now, I'm not saying that one was the cause of the other, but we got a lot of anecdotal evidence, not only in ad testing, but from people once these were on air, that they really felt as though they were getting to know this guy in a way they didn't know him. So I think effective ads are ads that feature the candidates, whether they're delivering a quote-unquote negative message or not. When we did Chris Murphy's ads in Connecticut, we used him to deliver the comparison between him and Linda McMahon. And I think it made a big difference. She featured herself in a lot of her ads, but the problem is she bought so many that people got sick and tired of seeing her. So, she sort of wore out her welcome by October 1st.
You want to say something?
No, I think ads that are that just are frankly clever. Up in Bergen County, there was a ad that should have gotten more attention. The Democrats, the Republican Party up there is completely dysfunctional, infighting. It's just, you know, it's really, it needs marital counseling. It's really terrible. And so they're just fighting all the time in public, and I just gladly reported in my Sunday column. It's almost like I call up Friday and call up 3 or 4 people, okay, who's throwing dishes at who now, et cetera, who's throwing not, and we put it in the paper. So the Democrats exploited this with an ad where they adapted one of those E-Trade ads with the baby in the seat, and you know, where he talks with an adult's voice. And he's scolding the Bergen Republicans for being babies, for not acting mature. And at the end, he's throwing spaghetti and you know, he's just making a mess out of himself. And the E-Trade baby's making fun of this is how the Republicans act. And he's throwing spaghetti all over himself. I thought it was really effective for a local race, but I like good humor in an ad like that. Savage humor, actually.
Did anybody else want to add into that?
I would just say, I know there's been a few studies that have shown that thoughtful, critical ads are effective, as opposed to like mudslinging, super negative, and also the entertaining ads. And so there was one study that looked specifically at I forget what year it was now, but when Hillary Clinton ran for the Senate first, and there was an ad with the babies wearing Mets and Yankees hats. And they said all these children have one thing in common: they lived in New York longer than Hillary Clinton. And so something like that, those sorts of ads can be very effective, I think.
Okay, how do you think Hurricane Sandy affected the campaign's ability to communicate? This is on a national basis, even though it was local to us.
I don't think it had any effect at all, actually. I mean, it was local. I mean, most in some of the states in the Midwest, there might have been a little bit of an effect, but for the most part, you know, the campaigns were not advertising too much in the states hardest hit by the storm.
Did they quiet down in other states during that time for the first few days?
I don't really
Yeah, I don't know that either.
I don't know. I've heard a lot of discussion about how its impact was minimal, but it did. I think to some people, it may have been a thing that helped seal the deal for Obama. He wasn't going to win because I think he was on track to win anyway. But this little additional veneer of bipartisan leadership at the end, and showing him in action, and working across the aisle with his new best friend Chris Christie, you know, it probably gave him some added. It probably threw a couple, maybe the cherry on top, I think, is a way of looking at it. But I don't really have any empirical data or anything like that to really point to. It's just more of a gut feeling.
Professor Avery, you want to say?
Yeah, I'll just echo what's been said. You know, the hurricane didn't hit any of the swing states. They were all, the real big effect were Democratic states anyways. And if you look at the polls, Obama had pulled away from Romney before the storm hit. And so even if it did widen the gap, I don't think certainly wouldn't have been decisive.
So as a sort of a counter to that one, what about Libya and the effect when that happened? Do you think that had a big effect on things?
No, I don't think so at all. I don't think it was, it's just, this was a race about the economy and the future of the economy, and it was just not on the radar for most people.
Right. What interests, if any, were served by the media's emphasis on the closeness of the presidential race, when we saw in retrospect that the outcome was never in doubt?
I think it probably increased turnout. When people think the race is going to be close, they're more likely to turn out to vote. So, and the reality is, and I'm a quantitative guy, and so I love the Nate Silvers and stuff. But the reality is that it was still a race, and the polls have been wrong before, and so I think that if the media portrays it as close and they boost turnout that way, then I think that's a positive effect that the news can have.
Steve, when you were with the Senate, you were real big on, we were doing some campaigns together in those days, on get out the vote efforts.
Yeah.
Would the closeness of a campaign help the get out the vote or hurt it?
Well, look, there's evidence, there's growing evidence now as you're seeing some of the post-mortem analysis of the campaign, that there was a level of sophistication in the Obama direct voter contact program that was pretty well unknown. It was very much under the radar this year. It was something that probably started with Obama for America in 2009 and just grew over the course of, but I don't know if people saw, again, in the New York Times, a story about how the campaign had a panel of behavioral scientists who were helping them plot how to motivate voters, and psychologists who were helping them do this. So it was a very, very sophisticated, and this does not surprise me because I'm friendly with the top 2 or 3 people in that campaign. They are all very, very data, behavior-driven professionals. The fact that they were drawing on academic expertise, not only in '08, but that they doubled down on that this year, I think is just sweet revenge for people who don't believe in climate change.
Do you feel as though the bias of some of the news sources poses a risk for the future of politics in this country? Well, some of the sources had some bias to them.
I think it's pretty clear that MSNBC is more liberal than Fox News. And so one of the dangers, I think, of this is that people are going to, at least they have the option of being exposed to news that is only consistent with their predispositions. And so they can say, I'm a Republican, I'm just going to watch Fox News, or I'm a Democrat, I'm just going to watch MSNBC. And so they don't get the sort of exposure to a broader view of what the issues are and what's going on in the campaigns, as maybe they would in the 1980s when, if they wanted to watch TV, they had to watch the network news, and so it's a disservice in that way, I think.
I think I've yet to see any, and maybe it's out there, but any impact that Fox and its counterbalance and its growing counterbalance from what I read today, there was that MSNBC is gaining on Fox and some of the rating, whether or not, what impact that has on independent voters. I'm sure they have their, echo chamber, like my parents in Florida, they watch MSNBC, and my mother's always, I call up, she's always, just been all revved up by Rachel Maddow, and she thinks, Ma, take it easy, she's, Obama's going to lose, I can't take it. But the undecided voter, the independent, the moderate, who's open-minded, allegedly open-minded, although I don't know why anybody by the last week of the campaign should be an undecided voter at that point. Either you're really like under a rock, or you've been out on a scallop boat and out in the ocean for the past month, and you're just coming back to land. I mean, how could you be an undecided voter on November 1st? I mean, I just don't.
Sharon, I think that the preponderance of media and the fact that it is multiplying in so many different ways, I think that we are getting a lot more less factual information online and from some of these opinion cable networks on both sides of the aisle. But that's what I think accounts in part for the exaggerated bump that Romney got out of the first debate. I mean, it was the first unfiltered look that voters got of him in the general election, with the exception of the convention. So, you know, I think it actually accentuates the importance of those unfiltered moments when the candidates are actually standing up and speaking for themselves.
And the flip side of that too, you saw a kind of, you know, unplugged Barack Obama too, and
Right.
unfiltered. And
Yeah.
look, you know, he didn't look at his watch like George Bush Sr. did some years ago, but he seemed,
That's before many of these students, you know that.
Yeah,
Okay.
geez.
This one's more of a personal question on this one. What brand or media source do you personally rely on for your political information? In your opinion, is that source liberal or conservative? How does your choice of media coverage reflect your beliefs, aside from being a paid Democrat? Are your political beliefs influenced by the media coverage, or are they supported by your choice of media coverage? Multi-part there.
Okay, yeah. I read the New York Times online. I subscribe to The Economist, and I read the New York Review of Books, which actually has. So I get a New York Review of Books has a very liberal view. The Economist, I think, is maybe a little bit more conservative, at least on economic issues, but fairly fair. And then New York Times, I think, is pretty fair. And so that was the first. What was the second part?
Oh, the second part. Wait, by the way, you're a sophisticated academic. What do you think the general public would be doing? Would they be reading The Economist? And you're buying the media. You know they're not.
I hope so.
You don't buy ads in The Economist, do you? The other part was the ones that you look at. Do you believe them to be liberal or conservative?
Okay, I addressed that.
Okay. And how does your choice reflect your own personal beliefs? Or you may not want to answer that one.
I try to get. I'm liberal, and I tell all my students that. And you know, I actually changed my. I was one of the undecideds. I changed my vote when I was in there. I had first selected Stein, and then I decided to vote for Obama. But so I like to get exposed. I like The Economist because I feel like this is going to give me a little bit more conservative view. And so, I mean, I want to get a view that's not consistent with maybe where I'm going to land.
And the last part of that question was, does what you read affect?
I'm sure it
thinking?
does. If it doesn't, I'm wasting my time. It affects me at least in that I become more educated, and whether it influences my opinion where I stand on an issue, I have no idea. I really don't.
Steve, where do you get your?
My sources for national news tend to be online sources like Real Clear Politics, because I
too,
can get
yeah.
both conservative and liberal on one website, and I think they do a pretty good job of keeping up with the polling nationally and state by state. Politico and The Hill for Washington news, and for news in New Jersey, the Record of Hackensack is the best paper, so I read that.
Charlie, other than your own
Well,
paper.
I'm a big Real Clear Politics fan because
So am I, by the way.
it does have balance. You know, we get the New York Times at home on the driveway, and I got to go through a whole fight in the morning with my wife over it. But I also find that, you know, the New York Times op-ed page is actually very balanced. I mean, you have people like Ross Douthat and David Brooks, and even Joe Nocera can be mildly conservative. And then you counterbalance that with the Frank Brunis and Krugman. Yeah, and Maureen Dowd, Maureen Dowd's not always a clear. I think if you ask the Clintons about Maureen Dowd, they would tell you they didn't think she was so liberal. So I don't know. I think I get a nice mix from that, and I also read a lot of online Washington Post and Politico, and I'll tell you the big surprise for me this year was the New Yorker. I mentioned that. My eye-opening piece that I read about Mitt Romney by Ryan Lizza, a profile of him that I really felt I understood him in a far more textured and nuanced way, and I came away with that objectively impressed with Mitt Romney's skill in a way that I had no idea, that I don't think I would have gotten from most of the mainstream media, frankly. Certainly not from the echo chamber on the left or the right. Because you weren't going to get it from MSNBC, and I'm not so sure you were going to get it from people on Fox, because they weren't particularly enamored with Mitt Romney anyway.
And the only place I can go nightly for national news is the PBS NewsHour. I mean, the only place where.
And notice when you go to Politico and RealClearPolitics.com, you'll see the Stockton Polling Institute is getting quoted on there more often.
Is that right?
We just opened, yes. And
Congratulations.
Yes, so when you need polling done, keep that in mind.
Okay.
All right, why don't we ask if each of you would take a minute or two and just give your last thoughts on this campaign and the media, and we'll close and let some of these students go to later classes. Who would like to start? He's pointing that way, so one of you is going first.
I'll start. This isn't necessarily related to the media, but it is related. I think it's unfortunate that it's going to be difficult to reform our electoral system, but I think that if you look at how much money was spent and on what and how long this campaign was, and public attitudes towards our electoral system, I think it's a real shame that it's not going to be easier for us to change how we elect the president and how we elect members to Congress. That's the topic for another maybe panel, but
yeah.
yes,
I mean, look, if just working off of that premise, if I had a wish list, it would be to move more towards a British system where we have a shorter campaign, where we have basically equal time given to candidates or near equal time given to candidates. I know equality is anathema in America, but I think we should try that. And we should attempt, I think, to remove money entirely. I'm taking myself out of business, but I think we should remove private contributions almost entirely from politics. And this is just a wish list. Of course, that will never happen because we're going in the opposite direction. But it just seems to me that we're losing our grasp on democracy right now.
I would second that, but you know, because we write a lot about campaign finance in our paper, and it's one of our obsessions. But I have to say one thing. I really felt heartened by that from a journalistic point of view. Heartened by this campaign. I felt that you saw the rise of extensive truth squatting in a lot of media platforms, more so than I've ever seen. PolitiFact and I can't think of the one that's out of U of Penn. But a lot of newspapers independently did this on their own, and I just felt it almost became a staple now to give readers this kind of neutral, separating the wheat from the chaff, and I think it was really invaluable. I felt, as I said before earlier, the interrelationship between the watching the debates and the social media was fabulous. I really felt like I was part of some sort of power grid of national reaction going on to that debate that I've never felt before. So I think there's some real positives about about this. And I also have to say, frankly, another positive is the kind of the meltdown on Fox News, not because from a partisan perspective, but that having a paid Republican operative who was running one of the biggest super PACs act as an anchor and then try to justify information that was just, try to shout down reality on national television and then become a kind of a spectacle embarrassment that's being talked about for days. I think it's not a partisan thing. I think it's really good for. I think it's actually an important moment for media.
It's the sweetest moment of the campaign.
Well, that's from, yeah.
Yeah.
Frankly, I mean, I get a little tired of MSNBC too. If this was the other
Oh, I don't
side,
watch MSNBC.
It drives me crazy.
Makes me sick, but,
It just drives me nuts. If the roles or tables were turned, I'd probably be saying the same thing.
They
honestly.
wouldn't be. We rely on fact.
And I listen to
Science.
MSNBC all the time. On the long rides in. Thank you, gentlemen. You were really wonderful, and thank you all for being here.